what's up? This is Charlie from Sang Lucci. I'm joined here by Ezra, also known as @HF Bonds Trader, if you guys follow us on Twitter. And today, I've convinced Ezra to join us to talk about, of all things, fencing, right? So the story behind this is that it was Ezra's birthday this weekend. Happy birthday again, Ezra. And so we had a big team outing, and I'm sitting there talking to Ezra's wife, and we start talking about Ezra's career as a fencer, right? And anyone who's followed us before, you guys know that Lucci and I, in particular, use the metaphor of tennis, sometimes boxing, but mostly tennis, because we're both pretty big tennis players, to sort of look at trading as a discipline, right? To zoom out a little bit more and to really look at what makes a good trader, what mental and psychological characteristics come together to make a good, profitable trader, and how that is similar to other sports. And fencing is something that I don't know that much about, but in the brief discussions I've had with Ezra about fencing, it seems like there is a ton of overlap, both just in terms of mastering a skill set that's sort of an individual discipline, and then also, in particular, fencing and its overlap with trading. So, Ezra, start out, give these guys an idea of like what level of fencing you were at, right? You weren't just like poking people for fun, like in some YMCA club, right? Like,
it's true,
with a sword, poking people with a sword.
I fenced Division One, right? Or varsity Division One team,
right?
I trained at one of the top clubs in the world. It's here in New York. It's I trained with Olympians daily growing up.
Right.
It was a pretty serious pursuit for me, and for a lot of my close friends, they were the types to be. Competing fairly frequently.
Right.
Very close friends of mine were on the national team, and these were the kinds of people that we practiced regularly. We shared coaches and that kind of thing.
Right.
Basically, for me, there are two, two important takeaways for me from competing at a high level for trading. One is the capacity to learn for sort of rigorous self criticism or self-analysis, right? Performance analysis, right?
Do you mean like tracking data, specific point? I mean, were you focusing in and saying, okay, this specific metric of my fencing performance is what I need to?
Well, it wasn't quantitative, but if something's not working, the feedback is immediate,
right?
And so there are several scopes on which you have to correct something that's not working. There's, the bout that you're in the middle of, right? Somebody keeps getting you on the same line, right? You need to immediately correct that. Right. Even if it's an ugly adjustment you have to make, even if it's not the most elegant adjustment, right? If your coach isn't calling, to do from the sideline, or if he's not calling a timeout for you, then, basically you have to make an adjustment on the spot, figure out what's going to prevent the bleeding, stop the bleeding, right, and then continue your attack. So basically there's that scope, the immediate, and then there's also the scope where in between bouts, off the strip, in between competitions, you watch the trends of where are you losing points. You elicit the help of your coaches and teammates, right? Where is it that you're continually bleeding points? It's in their interest to help you too. But so there's the ability for self-analysis, self-criticism, and then there's also, one thing that's absolutely true for me for sports, for engineering, for fencing, is that, the ultimate determiner at the end of the day, it's the ultimate performance, it's how your system performs, how your trade performs, right? How what's on the scoreboard at the end of the day, right? It's the same thing, it's in fencing, it's who wins or loses. There are all kinds of people with beautiful technique, who didn't win bouts. Right. And there are all kinds of people with the ugliest technique, who won bout after bout, won tournament after tournament, and it's frustrating, right? For competitors, for coaches, but it happens, right? And so, but really, you can't take a trophy away from someone because they're ugly, because their serve is ugly, right? If you can't hit it, right? Sucks to you, right? And that's
Okay, well, I mean, one of the things when I look at you as a professional, someone who's worked very closely with you over the last 6 months now, maybe more than that, and then, just in general as a person, you are extremely good at looking at, I think, yourself and your performance objectively, right? Of saying, forget, myself, my ego, whatever, this is what, if I was able do to improve, right? I think you're extremely good at that, right? And just really not giving yourself any slack, pushing yourself as hard as you can. Do you think you developed that while you were, was fencing like really?
Yeah, I'd say that came to fencing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think the a lot of the coaching talent is of Russian or Ukrainian origin, and there's a certain attitude and demeanor,
right,
that's prevalent, at least in that, and they are very gruff. There's really no room for bullshit, and there's no tolerance for whining,
right.
And so basically, yeah, I think that a natural outcropping of that environment is sort of a realistic, objective self-analysis.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that was the hardest part for you? Like, well, how about this? What age did you start fencing at? How old were you first started?
12.
Okay, 12. So 13. Was that? You're a 12-year-old kid. Is that a hard thing to get used to? The guys being that hard on you, coaches being that hard on you?
Yeah. When you're a kid, you're resilient as hell.
Right.
And maybe it was just the house I grew up in too.
Whatever.
I
get
want to yell at me
from some high
smack me around and yell at me, whatever. I don't know. It's no different. That kind of shit I'm used to.
Right.
But interestingly, I feel like you never get the full effect of your training until it's no longer even that. Until I haven't stepped on a strip in a couple of years now.
Right.
And I find myself I'm sure I'd be better going back to it. Yeah, absolutely. That I've had time to apply everything that I've, all kinds of training and that kind of thing to, obviously golf, right, double the sport,
right.
And also life. And so, so I think, basically the things that you learn, they never crystallize in time to make a difference, that you wish they had.
Of course.
You got to take them with you later.
There's that sweet spot for everyone where it's like you're old enough that you have the wisdom and the experience, right? But you're young enough that either your body or your mind is still able to execute on what you need to do. Exactly. You're probably actually in that zone.
Yeah, I haven't hit the male physical peak, at least not for fencing. Right. For that.
What is the male physical peak for fencing?
35.
35, right? Yeah, you got some time. A couple of years. Yeah.
Some time.
All right. But okay, so what you're getting to a little bit is like what I really love to dig into. It's like, in terms of like mastering something, you just said it yourself. It's not the pursuit of fencing wasn't, you didn't sort of actualize your potential there until you had left it, right? And do you feel like, I guess the core question of the whole conversation we're having is, do you feel like a lot of that carried into trading? You sort of built up a lot of momentum and from a self-development standpoint in your fencing career, and then that carried you into trading?
It's possible. Again, my training in trading,
right,
is also, whenever you're in the training stage, it's a blur of some form or other. You're in way over your head.
Right.
And you're taking everything into a fire hose. And so, I would have to assume that there was a direct effect, from the, fencing directly into the trading, because the guy who hired me, the first guy who hired me, for trading, he was a tennis player, actually, a very competitive tennis player. And he was, I remember that fencing was important to him.
Interesting.
Now that you mention it,
did he have experience fencing?
He had friends who fenced. He knew a teammate of mine who was actually the one who put us in touch.
Okay.
But the athletics were important to him.
Okay.
Now that I think about
because
it.
he knew.
You hear all the higher tennis players.
Yeah. That's like, you hear it all the time. The D1 athletes often make very good traders.
Well, the reason I think, absolutely, and I think that there's also another reason, which is that once you have athletes at a certain level,
right,
it also implies a certain amount of trainability.
Yes.
Right. In order to get to a certain level of athletics, you have to learn to shut up and learn fast.
Right. Right. And also confidence in yourself. Right. You can't put yourself up on a stage where you're fencing at Harvard and you're training with Olympians unless you've developed a level of confidence. Right. Humility as well as confidence. Right. That balance. You trade, especially being automated like you are, and everything you're doing with the X Algos project. You're very, very rule-based, right? And I've talked to you before about how one of the temptations for you sometimes when your algo is running throughout the day is to let it run its course, right? And to not intervene unless there's circumstances that are built into the strategy for the day, not intervene and adjust, right? you have rules that facilitate your disciplined approach to training. With fencing, the same way. I mean, I would imagine there has to be a lot of creative, impromptu reaction. You're basing your behavior off of your opponent, right? So if he steps with one, I don't know how it works. If he steps with one foot, you're then adjusting your behavior to him. Was there still a lot of sort of rule-based discipline and training going into it?
No, it's interesting. There are fundamentals in fencing that are very rules-based, but I think interestingly, a lot of the best fencers were the ones who there's this divergence, this dichotomy, which I always found really interesting. But there was the way you fenced when you were taking a lesson with your coach, which was often completely different from the way you fence in competition.
In
the style, because when you're fencing with your coach, your footwork is perfect. It's uncompromised. Your posture is perfect.
Is that
your extensions are perfect? Of course, because he'll smack you.
Oh, okay. So you're just like the standard's that high. You're like you got to for your coach.
For your coach, it has to be perfect. He won't waste his time with you if you're screwing around. Your posture, everything is perfect. But the level of improvisation when you're fencing a live bout,
right?
Your footwork, the tempo changes in different ways. People have their own style, which comes into play a lot more when in training, right? Like the way you fence in a bout, you would never. It would be disrespectful to fence to train with your coach, that way. But interestingly, a lot of the best fencers are the ones who stepped outside of the rigid, sort of the rigid pattern style, lesson framework.
Okay.
And on the strip, they really branched out. People who were too rigid and who fenced and bounced like it was a lesson,
right?
Often had difficulty excelling. In trading, I had to learn. I had to be taught and instructed specifically about the discipline of trading. It was a new discipline for me. It was not something that I had already learned in fencing.
Right.
I play a little music too. And there's one thing to you can hit all the notes, but then you can also you can express yourself through slight differences in the way you play. That was not something that was encouraged in the style of trading that I was taught.
Right. Do you feel like you're there now with your trading?
That's not something that's interesting to me. For me, it's all rule based. There's no, the creativity comes into play in different in different ways.
Okay.
Not by violating your rule.
Right.
It's just different. And having a strict rule framework enables you to, perform, analysis on your trading method. Perform quantitative analysis and scientific analysis. Because if everything is remaining the same, then you can observe what's changing. You can change one thing and see how the outcome is altered. So for trading, you have to take a more scientific approach.
Yeah, actually, one conversation I want to have with you next time, can't do it now, but the scientific method of trading, right? I mean, you have such a deep science background. I want to have you kind of dig through that.
Absolutely. Rules what I do.
This is kind of a random question, but maybe I'm not too far off base. So, with you trading now, we can't go too far into it, but you're not trading normally, right? I mean, and I think professionally, you have pretty much always you've been in a professional, fun structure, right? I'll show you where I'm kind of going with this, but when you were fencing, like a lot of especially young tennis players, when they are training, you can kind of tell the guys who are playing for themselves, right? Because they, some of them love the sport, or some of them they just have an ego thing where they're whether it's positive or negative, they're kind of playing for themselves. And then there's guys who are playing for their coach, playing for their parents.
Yeah, sure.
Some of them are one and the same, especially with tennis parents. It's they're known as helicopter parents, right? They're always there. So when you were fencing, do you feel like you were fencing for yourself? Do you feel like that changed over time? Was it something you really enjoyed, or do you feel like looking back you were there was this one guy that I wanted to crush, or there was one coach that I really wanted to impress?
It's a very good question. At some point, it just became a way of life for me.
Right.
The training was such a rigorous schedule.
Right.
I was fencing, at the club, but I was also fencing at school.
Okay.
I had a school team, we were dominant force. I was captain of that for 2 years.
Is this high school?
High school.
High school. Okay.
So, this is, I thought, by the time I was in college, it was already just a way of life for me.
Right. We talking about 6 a.m. practice kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was constant. It was evening, but yeah,
Okay.
It was evening, summers.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So it just became, it just like, you started at a pretty young age, and after a while, it was just like, this is the way of life.
Yeah, that was just, it's just what you do.
What I do.
You train.
Right.
Train.
Do you, I mean, I'm kind of pulling this from the Andre Agassi book, where he talks about, like, how he actually hated tennis for a long period. I mean, we're talking about one of the best players of all time. He talks about how he despised it.
I love Agassi's,
Yeah. Have you read the biography?
No, but I've seen him speak a couple
times. Yeah, it's fascinating. And it kind of goes against that whole mentality of like, oh, well, you have to love what you do, right? Like, if you're really going to be great at what you do, you have to love what you do. And with Agassi, he was like, I despised it. I hate tennis. But for him, the big realization was it was a vehicle to a greater place for meaning in his life and to be able to help others. I mean, looking back, do you look at fencing and do you say, like, I enjoyed it? I like fencing?
I liked winning.
Spoken like a champion.
I mean, I definitely didn't like practicing or training.
Right.
I don't think I loved competing. I would say I was probably conflicted about it, especially, the training is hard, and those Russians are, they're rough, and, like, definitely when they had us at training camp in the summer, no, I did not like waking up at 4:30 a.m. to, like, to run and train. And yeah, it's real tough, but, it's a beautiful sport, which at least it's easy for me in retrospect when, like, my lungs aren't burning to love it,
Right. You look at what you do now with all the strategy and development, and I mean, you're a one-man shop, at this point. Do you look at the work that you have to put into the algorithm, which is not the case. The fun part is obviously looking at the P&L and tweeting that out and saying, this is awesome, and I'm doing this. Do you look at the work as sometimes, I mean, do you enjoy it sometimes, or like this is what you have to do?
Well, again, very interesting. I mean, on the one hand, I love that I do what it is that I love to do.
Right.
It's engineering in its, for me, sort of this elemental form where, the higher quality of your engineering, obviously better results. They're very easy to tell. So, I get to do what I love, and that is awesome.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's a discipline. And so a lot of it is forcing myself to get out of bed early, forcing myself to, to revise code that I'd really rather just let, run the way it is.
Right.
On a certain level, you don't want to push yourself. I think that, if I don't know anyone who, wants to practice, wants to push themselves, but that's definitely required in what I do constantly.
Right. Yeah,
it's discipline.
Yeah, it's a discipline. It makes sense. All right, last time I'll put you on the spot. I mean, if you could pull one thing from your fencing career that in terms of, new guys, or traders who are out there watching right now that are they're either click traders or maybe guys who are trying to automate their strategies. One thing from your fencing career that you feel like has carried on into your trading career, what's like the one gem you feel like, I don't know how many hours you put in fencing, how many hours in trading, but it's got to be in the 10,000 each,
Yeah, definitely.
What's the world of wisdom?
I would say a win is a win. It doesn't matter how close it was.
Right.
I'd say, winning bout, same thing as a winning day in trading. It doesn't matter how big you were up or whatever. Right. A win is a win, and take it home.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, write off, losing situations when you can rally back for a narrow win. And at the end of the day, I think a win is a win, regardless how close, regardless how small.
Right.
And I think that people forget that sometimes. Going for the blowout win, I think people forget that small wins are count the same.
Or they even sometimes, I guess, discount a win, a small win, if it didn't happen the way they wanted it to happen. Right.
I try and take a lot of satisfaction, gratification from even small wins.
Right.
And I think that's I think it's very
I've definitely seen that reflected in your behavior, your reaction to, when we put guys in. And if you don't know this, Ezra is running an algorithm right now. I mean, it's in the development phase, but we've been posting the true sort of Sang Lucci spirit. We've been posting the P&Ls of the algorithm, of the strategy. There's a couple of strategies that are being employed there to a Twitter handle that is @xalgos. And so you guys can check that out every morning. Those P&Ls are put out there, and as time goes on, we're starting to reveal more and more information about what's going on.
Sure, the project isn't pre-launch, but we will reveal all kinds of information about it.
Right.
In due time, at launch time, and thereafter.
Yep. And so yeah, I mean, I can just say, looking at you, I mean, you had days where big winning days, and you had days that were like small winning days. For the most part, you're pretty steady. You're like, win is a win. You live what you preach right now. So. All right, guys. Well, if you have questions ever for Ezra, are you still doing the ad?
Oh yeah, the Ask thing. Yeah, we did a little one this Thursday. So yeah, Transparency Thursdays from time to time.
Right.
Hit the Ask FM page, sure.
Yep, it's a cool thing to check him out. He's also the new featured partner on the front page of SangLucci.com. We're extremely lucky to have him in our operations and be able to support him as he's building out what he's building. So, and if you have questions for Ezra or any of us here, just hit us up, contact at SangLucci.com, and we'll get them answered either on air or just an email response. So, Ezra,
thank you.
See you guys.